I want to let you know about our guest tonight, Dr. Taylor Wallace. And we had the great fortune of meeting Taylor a couple years ago. And he is the principal and CEO of the Think Healthy Group, and also an adjunct professor at the Department of Nutrition and Food Studies at George Mason University. He has been a guest on Dr. Oz many times. He's got his fingers in so many pots. He is at the pinnacle of the nutrition world, advising and counseling so many on how to make appropriate choices and what's actually in your food. What are you putting in your mouth? What benefit is it getting to you? What is it doing for your body? That's Taylor's business. That's his world. That's what he does. And of course, so we would go to him and ask him, hey, what's in our ReMag and what does it do when we put it in our body? And he came up with all kinds of great answers for us. Let me just also say that he is a senior fellow at the Center of Magnesium Research and Education. He's the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Dietary Supplements. He is the deputy editor-in-chief of the Journal of the American College of Nutrition. And he is the editor of 6 academic textbooks. And he has the best cookbook called Sizzling Science, which is a really fun way of marrying food and nutrition and education all together.
Taylor's business or company, Think Healthy, we were introduced by another magnesium friend, Andrea Rosenoff, who co-wrote the book Magnesium Factor. We said we wanted to start doing research with our ReMag, and we asked who she'd recommend, and you were number one on her list. So when we approached you, Taylor, we got along right away, of course, like a house on fire, you, me, and Ginny. But what did you think of what we were bringing to you, or this ReMag product?
Well, I tell you, there's two things that hit me initially. One, I love working with clinicians like yourself, because the ultimate goal of a clinician is to help the patient. And, I think a lot of times that's very different from, some of the research I've done with, what I would call big food, or some of the big food manufacturers, where it's all about marketing and, looking at the benefits of a product, versus when I work with clinicians like you, it's the exact opposite. It's what product can we develop based on the science that will work for our customers. And I think that's a really enlightening thing about working with you, and as well as other clinicians. I think that a lot of times in food, we miss that piece. The other thing that I really liked is, it's novel. ReMag is a really novel product. It's picometer in size. We confirm that in our lab. And, we've never seen anything like that in the supplement industry before. And so I think, we know that there is a challenge with magnesium, particularly from supplements, because, at levels above 350 milligrams per day in supplements, you have this higher risk of, GI effects or laxative effects, and, abdominal cramping, things like that. And this to me was very novel, because a large portion of, Americans at least don't have, optimal magnesium intake. We see, agriculture has really depleted magnesium from the soil. So even, when we look at, nutrient intakes, some of those values are quite old, and the soil in the U.S. has changed quite substantially. And so to me, this was a really novel, practical solution for people, and it was something scientifically stimulating because it is so new and novel, and I think our results mimic just that.
Well, before we go there, tell us what you did to prove the picometer size of ReMag, because that's really quite fascinating.
Yeah, so we basically worked with our physics department to use a technique where we take basically light waves, and we pass light waves through a clear container that's full, that has the ReMag solution inside. And from how that light refracts off of those particles, we can then measure the particle size compared to a standard. And, you know, it's a really in-depth and really extensive and exhaustive scientific way to look at something, but it's the standard out there. It's the gold standard way of measuring particle size. And, you know, we confirmed the picometer size of ReMag, and, you know, that was the one piece that I was a little bit timid about, you know, because I was, you know, wondering how in the world could this technology get there? And is this too good to be true? And it wasn't at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then didn't you tell us that you kind of didn't really totally believe it, so you ran the test 3 times?
We did, and you know, there's a couple reasons for that. You know, when you have graduate students that are helping you with things and they come back with this amazing finding, you say, okay, go do this again. Like, because, you know, graduate students in turn, and then when they come back to you twice and they say, we got the same thing, then you go with them and you say, okay, I want to see this. Because,
oh, wow. So there's number 3.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, you know, did you do something wrong? Are you adding things up, you know, incorrectly? What am I not seeing here? You know, I've got to confirm this. And, you know, we had a great set of, like, not only graduate students, but postdocs and research team members on board working with this project. And, you know, like I said, we found some really amazing things, and this being one of them.
Right. Right, yes, and Ginny and I actually went to Purdue and met you there, met with the team. Ginny, tell us about your Purdue experience with this great team.
Well, I thought the thing that was really interesting was just the expansiveness of how they actually work. I mean, when we looked at the way that the study was written, Taylor, it was incredible to see the detail. People would come into the lab. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they came in, they were there for 8 hours. Everything that they did was totally controlled. What they drank, what they ate, how, you know, everything that was induced into their body. They were blood tested several times. And we did the magnesium testing. They had to write in their journals about what they ate after they left. So it really was so rigorous to determine what kind of magnesium intake they were at, what they had done, and then how the ReMag and the other placebos or whatever they were being administered were actually being affected, you know, were affecting their bodies. Is that the way most studies are run like that, at that level of control?
No, and actually that's a big criticism in nutrition science right now, because, you know, a lot of people would just have you come into the clinic in the morning, they would, you know, give you the dose, or maybe you even took it before you got into the clinic, they gave it to you the night before, and you know, you would come in, they would run your blood sample in 10 minutes and you'd be on your way. But the issue with doing that is you risk that that person goes and, you know, eats a dark green leafy salad for lunch that's rich in magnesium, or they, you know, go have a candy bar that, you know, throws everything out of whack. And what we did is called a controlled feeding study. And when you say controlled, I mean, we controlled how many times the patients could get up during the day, how much movement they had, because, you know, we didn't want to affect, you know, basal metabolic rates, or, you know, differences in how quick your body is going to, you know, process things. So, you know, we had a kitchen where we measured down to the gram of how much food they consumed. We tried to get them to consume, you know, all of their food. You know, we gave them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then packed them a snack to go. And so we really tried to do our due diligence to ensure that every little piece of this study was controlled. And I think that's the real direction that nutrition science needs to go. We have to go the extra mile, because remember, all of these nutrients interact, and, you know, magnesium on its own has over 600 different enzymatic reactions it affects in the body. So, you know, you need to control everything that goes in with it, or you might just completely show no results in a study, because, you don't have control.
Right, right. What we're talking about here, I guess we're coming at this a bit backwards. The study that Taylor and his group did was a ReMag absorption study. We decided that we would just take one dose, 1 teaspoon of ReMag, and give it to someone and see what would happen. And I know that's another thing that you folks were saying, well, that's not much magnesium. What do you expect is going to happen? Correct, Taylor? Well, what did you think when we said, well, no, our ReMag, 1 teaspoon, and something's going on? What did you think?
Well, the way that you had initially described the product, it made biological sense. I was still skeptical. Because, a lot of companies come to you and they have, this great product that's going to work and it's just going to cure everybody's everything, and then it doesn't work in your trial. And this was the exact opposite experience, in that ReMag did affect blood levels of magnesium with just 1 dose. And, I'm not sure that any other supplement has done that. At least I'm not aware of any other study or finding that's similar to that.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. So tell us what happened after the person took their dose, and the different, the different blood tests that we decided to do, because this was a comparison of what the blood was telling us. So, fill us in on all that, if you would. Yeah,
so basically the patients came into the clinic 3 different days, on 3 different days. Those individual days in the clinic were separated, out by a week, so, that there wasn't any, crossover from one treatment to the next. In the morning, we gave them a single, 1 teaspoon dose of ReMag, and we took blood samples every couple of hours. Up until 8 hours, they were allowed to leave. We packed them a snack overnight, and then they were told to come back in the morning, and we took a 24-hour blood sample. And, then we looked at what's called area under the curve. So we were blinded to what treatment the patients were on. And at the end, we were able to look at, blood magnesium levels, what we call area under the curve, for the placebo versus ReMag. And, obviously the area under the curve was much greater for ReMag, which, you can mathematically calculate, the rise in blood magnesium based on that. We used 3 different markers of magnesium status. So we used what's called ionized magnesium, which is the amount of magnesium in your blood that is available for your body to do something with. A lot of times, traditionally, the next marker, total serum magnesium, has been what's used, but that magnesium is really bound to proteins in the serum, and your body can't really utilize that. And those levels don't really change either. And so, we were also testing this whole idea that ionized magnesium might be the better marker of status for individuals. The third marker we used is urinary magnesium. So the amount of magnesium that you can collect from the urine after so much time. It's not as accurate as a marker, obviously. People don't have to go pee on the hour, but we capture that as well. And so, going back to what you said, Carolyn, one of the reasons that I have loved working with you all is that you all really, you don't just want to substantiate your product. This wasn't just about, making a product claim to you all. It was about advancing the science, because I think you all really want to see, the science behind magnesium advance. And that was another really, nice, lovely thing about working with you all is, I felt like continuously have advanced science in this area, not just for a single product claim, but just the scientific evidence as a whole. And I think that's reflected in the fact that we have very clearly shown ionized magnesium to be the better marker of status. And I actually was on a part of a group of scientists, back in, it was 2015, 2016, that was proposing to the federal government that serum magnesium be included in a lot of our assessments of the U.S. population, because there was no magnesium status marker at the time. And, now I've completely changed my scientific opinion that it should be whole blood ionized magnesium that's more reflective of status, just because of this ReMag study. And I think that's important moving forward with, our dietary guidelines, our federal government, things we do, need to be reflective of the most current science. And I think you all, through your research grant to us, really help to move science forward as well. We talk a lot, about ReMag, just between us, when we catch up over the phone, and some of the, conditions and disease states that your patients are going through, and how they're seeing improvement. And, Carolyn, we talk a lot about magnesium, but Carolyn has this huge knowledge of all these other minerals and electrolytes and things going on in the body, and how they have these wonderful synergies, and how to really develop supplements again around that science.
And that's what that we wanted to do with your research is make sure people started to realize what is absorbed, how much is absorbed, how do you measure that absorption. And I think we got some good answers. You've already told us that with one dose, 1 teaspoon, 300 milligrams of ReMag, it showed up in the blood test. How soon did it show up, Taylor, in the blood?
It shows up in the blood. Well, you can definitely tell the difference from about 2 hours after ingestion. You can definitely tell the difference. Significantly speaking, I'd say 4 to 6 hours, you start seeing really marked, significant differences in the bloodstream.
So, yes, now that's interesting, 2 to 4 hours, because we'll have our customers tell us that they've probably been taking a ReMag, and then they'll get a heart palpitation or an ache or pain, and they'll take some ReMag, and they say they notice it pretty quickly. So, that was what we were part of what we were trying to look at. How quickly does it get into the bloodstream? But to measure it in the ionized sense, you're saying 2 to 4 hours. But the serum magnesium level, was that elevated at all?
No, so serum magnesium was not elevated, and that was one of the interesting things about this study. Serum magnesium is what scientists call homeostatically regulated, meaning that the body's level never really changes. Because magnesium is so important, your body likes to keep levels stable, or else you risk, heart palpitations and other symptoms of deficiency. And so, what was surprising was that the ionized changed. And remember, like I said, ionized is what is available to the body to, do work from. Serum stays mainly bound. And, it was a really interesting study. I don't want to go and say I was completely shocked by the results, but I think it really, really does advance science along the way in this area.
And magnesium in general, did you learn more about magnesium? You already knew about magnesium. You knew Andrea Rosenoff. You're on her board, etc. You knew about magnesium, but what more did you learn by doing our study?
Well, I mean, as with any study, it forces you to really review the, total scientific literature. And actually one of the, side things that came out of this study, a few years ago, like I said, I was involved with this group that was looking at serum magnesium as the standard for looking at magnesium status. And so it made me really go back and, one, assess that literature, but then two, when COVID-19 first came around, magnesium was fresh on my mind, and I had looked through all the biochemistry and all the literature. And, you reminded me of this when you started talking about vitamin D. Magnesium activates vitamin D. So when we talk about serum levels of vitamin D, or what we call serum 25 dihydroxy vitamin D levels, magnesium, it plays a critical role in regulating that. So if you are low in magnesium, your serum vitamin D levels won't maximize. And that seems to be somewhat peculiar within COVID-19, because remember, vitamin D plays a really active role, particularly with that ACE2 receptor and the whole renin-angiotensin system. And so, a lot of that cytokine storm, magnesium is very involved in inflammation, but, magnesium really kind of like it hits a double whammy with COVID-19 because, one, it can really block some of that inflammation that you get during the cytokine storm after contracting the infection. And two, it really, activates vitamin D in the blood, and, that decreases your risk, or it's been published, fairly consistently, from across the world in the last couple of months, that higher vitamin D levels above 30 nanograms per milliliter in the blood and the serum can prevent the onset or prevent infection from COVID-19 quite substantially. And if you look back in medical records of people within the last year, there was a study out of Chicago where, they reviewed over 4,000 patient medical records in the last year, and people who had lower serum vitamin D levels were much more likely to contract COVID-19 compared to people who had higher blood levels. And so, I think magnesium is one of those nutrients, when bringing it back to your question, I think a lot of the biochemistry behind magnesium was done a very long time ago. You have some very small studies from like the 70s, 80s, early 90s, where we learned a lot about the biochemical aspects of magnesium in the body. Move forward to today, we as scientists talk a lot more about systematic reviews and meta-analyses and, compiling big data, which is good, but it doesn't always give you the full understanding of a nutrient. And like what I was talking about with, controlled feeding studies versus regular trials, there's a lot of confounding in there, synergies with other nutrients. So it's really important for us to understand the biochemistry when it comes to not only developing products, but the science behind a nutrient like magnesium, because I was able to really argue that magnesium could be significantly involved in COVID-19, and I hope that work will lead to clinical trials that are funded either by our federal government or a larger foundation of sorts that's trying to get to the bottom of this.
Right. Now you're talking about the magnesium and vitamin D. That's a paper that you were writing just recently. Did that get picked up, and will that be published?
Yes, so we're actually waiting for it to come out any day in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition. So it got accepted at the end of last week and should be online within the next couple of days.
Awesome. And that brings me to the first of several papers that you're doing on our research. Tell us about the journal that published your first paper.
Right. So the journal that published our first paper, which was titled Circulating Ionized Magnesium as a Measure of Supplement Bioavailability, Results from a Pilot Study or Randomized Control Trial, published in the journal Nutrients, which is one of the, again, like the Journal of American College of Nutrition, is one of the top journals in the field. That's very heavily cited and read by almost all nutrition scientists in the field. What was nice about Nutrients, the journal Nutrients, is that it has a really broad circulation. So you not only get the nutrition science community, but you also have a lot of people that are clinicians and, you know, different types of registered dietitians, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, other health professionals that often look to that journal. And so, you know, I always try to, you know, a lot of times as nutrition scientists, we publish in these little journals that are very specific, but, you know, they're read by a very small group of similar researchers, and they don't necessarily get out there, you know, very broadly. And Nutrients is not one of those journals. It has a very broad circulation, and so we were really excited to get accepted to this journal, just because it has a very high quality standard. It's a high bar to get published in that journal.
Has there been any feedback that's gotten back to you yet about this paper, Taylor?
Oh yeah, I mean, we have been, you know, in constant contact with not only the Center for Magnesium Education and Research, but we've also been in contact with NIH about the study, been in contact with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. As you probably know, our dietary guidelines are getting ready to publish here in the next month or so. And, you know, magnesium is a nutrient that a lot of Americans lack. And so this research we definitely shared with those groups. And, you know, we see that there's already been hundreds of downloads of this manuscript. So, you know, we look at what we call number of citations, what scientists call an impact factor, how much impact, how many times cited this manuscript is. It takes about 2 years, right? Because people are writing their manuscripts and doing their other trials that they cite the research in. So it takes a good 2 years to know what your impact is. But we already have several hundred downloads of the manuscript itself, and, you know, over 500 views of the manuscript online. So I'm pretty confident that's some pretty awesome metrics. So, you know, people are catching on. They're seeing, and, you know, like I said, the wonderful thing about you all really investing in advancing the science is now we've sparked the idea for other researchers to go and look at their data sets and, you know, to keep the wheel moving on this. And so it's really about moving the field forward.